Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we are going to take a look at a small solo RPG available on itch.io, and that is called Little Town, and that was created by Gustavo Coelho. And this game was provided to me, the PDF, for a review copy quite a while ago. It's taken me quite a while to get this to the table, but I've been meaning to for some time, and I wanted to do it before the end of 2023. But if you like things like Twin Peaks, then this is a fantastic game for you. Or if you like things like Alan Wake, I know Alan Wake, the video game part 2 just came out, and people are really, really into that. And so this also could give you kind of that Alan Wake vibe, because Alan Wake was very largely inspired by Twin Peaks and by David Lynch. And speaking of David Lynch, I am also surrounded by a whole bunch of David Lynch stuff. So after we talk about the game, we are going to be taking a look at some books about David Lynch and some magazines. And then I'm also going to do my ranking of all of David Lynch's his significant work, his major works. David Lynch is my favorite filmmaker. I love so much about him. He really speaks to me on a very, very kind of a deep, personal, and spiritual level. I have a great affinity with a lot of David Lynch's cinema. So Little Town is a tabletop RPG, of course, inspired by David Lynch and Twin Peaks. Mechanics-wise, it is inspired by the PTBA system. So it is a system like Starforged or Ironforged and Ironsworn, I should say. Ironsworn or Starforged. And also the system that inspired my favorite solo supplement, and that is Solitary Defilement. It is a system that has different moves that you can do. And then depending on how you accomplish those moves, certain narrative things will happen. And so I created these move cards from the PDF that was given to me for a review copy. Now, if you end up kind of liking the system, you end up liking some of the things I'm showing today, but the whole kind of Twin Peaks, small, weird town vibe isn't for you, the bundle that is now available on itch.io also comes with us 2 supplements. And one of those supplements is super cool. It's called Eldritch Town. And Eldritch Town is a supplement that turns this kind of Twin Peaks setting into a more cosmic horror setting. And so this comes with a whole bunch of different charts and different things to roll up to give you more of a Cthulhu-esque, a more Call of Cthulhu style investigation. And that's really what Little Town is. It is a game that is focusing on an investigation, because like Twin Peaks, in Twin Peaks, we had Agent Dale Cooper, and he came into the town of Twin Peaks to investigate the murder of Laura Palmer. She's dead, wrapped in plastic, and all of that. And of course, that kicked off this great television series that just kind of culminated into the Twin Peaks: The Return, the 3rd season that came out just a few years ago, and that was really, really great. But if you like a kind of a murder mystery with a slight supernatural hint, a hint of the supernatural going on, bubbling up underneath the surface with weird NPCs and weird characters, then you might really, really enjoy this game. All you need to play Little Town is the PDF. You can create a zine like I did here, or you can just work off of a tablet or your computer. You will need a few sheets of some investigation sheets and a scene sheet. And there are some other things that you can print out to help you facilitate your play. You will need a few D6, and you will need a standard deck of cards. Now, I have my Twin Peaks Coffee deck of cards here, and we have some Twin Peaks themed playing cards, and you will take your deck of cards and you will separate it into suits. So we'll have a deck of hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs. You don't need the jokers, but I thought the jokers were really cool in this deck because they are of the Jumping Man. For hardcore fans of Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me, you will recognize the Jumping Man there, one of the evil lodge entities. I also have a deck of Twin Peaks Trumps cards. So Trumps is a game More famous in the UK, I think. I don't believe people over in the US or play trumps, but I thought this would be a cool deck just to have as maybe some inspiration. So these are all drawings, illustrations of a lot of the main characters from the original Twin Peaks show, but this is just kind of here for inspiration. So let's take a look at Littletown. I do have my character created and the basis for my investigation. And so the case that I am investigating is there is a sickness in town. And it's some kind of strange pandemic, probably some kind of a pandemic with a supernatural origin. The town that I am investigating in is called Cypress Falls, and this is in the mountains. I am playing an FBI agent named Agent Bradley Walters. He's a federal agent. For my attributes, we have agility, strength, mind, and presence. I have an agility of -1, a strength of 0, a mind of +1, and a presence of +2. Those will often get added to the rolls of 1 or 2d6 to determine the outcomes on various moves here. So if you wanted to avoid conflict, whenever someone starts to fight with you, you can roll a 2d6 plus presence plus the NPC attitude. Depending on how the NPCs react to you, you will have a penalty or bonus. Let's say the NPC didn't really hate me. This was more of a mental conflict, let's say, and the NPC had a zero bonus to this test. I would roll 2d6, add my presence, which is a +2, plus the NPC attitude, which we said was a 0. So we have a 7 plus 2 is 9. So 7 to 9, you manage to calm down your attacker after their first hit or after that first bout of conflict there. A Mark 1 wound or a psychic wound or something like that. There's probably better moves for handling mental conflicts there. But we have things like avoiding conflict. You can get into a brawl, crossfire, case closed, defy danger, ending a scene, fight death. That's when you take too many wounds. Your character takes too many wounds and you have to fight death. You can face your doppelganger. So in the world of Twin Peaks, and actually in a lot of David Lynch's cinema, there are ideas of the characters having doppelgangers, and they kind of represent an ultimate evil that you might have to face off against. You can interrogate. That would probably be a better mental challenge there in the example for interrogate. You can investigate. You can intimidate. You can go on someone's trail if you're trailing somebody looking for clues. You can push your luck. You can reveal a secret. You can remember a dream, because as you know, for those of you who are into David Lynch really in general and Twin Peaks specifically, dreams are very, very important to the investigation, to understanding what is going on, uncovering clues, uncovering secrets. Run away from a fight, sweet talk, and take a breath. So those are all of the things that you can do. And so I have a secret, because everybody has secrets. That's one of the things that Twin Peaks is known for, is because it is kind of also a spoof of nighttime soap operas. And so every single character in this game, all the NPCs, all the people that you meet will have secrets. My secret is betrayal. I'm not quite sure what that means yet, but over the course of the game, I will more acutely define betrayal. And I'm interested in this case of this strange supernatural pandemic that is making the town sick, because those responsible will become more powerful. So some entity, some organization has unleashed this pandemic. And if I don't solve what is happening in the town of Cypress Falls, then that organization will become more powerful. And they are kind of an evil organization. And I'm not quite sure what they're all about yet. As far as my items go, my items are associated with my archetype. I have a gun, a badge, a recorder, and a flashlight. I have 0 instability. Instability is how closely linked your secret is with your instability. And if your instability ever gets too high, then that is a trigger for a game over. And also, if you ever take 3 wounds, then that can also trigger a game over. Luck, I need to roll up my luck, and I'll have to look that up maybe as we're going through the book here, because I forgot to write that down. The book is pretty well organized and it's pretty well written. I believe it is translated. I believe the creator is from Brazil. And so some of the translation, there is a few issues, but nothing significant and nothing that I think would prevent anybody from learning the game. But we have our introduction, and we have here a quote from the log lady. All that we see in this world is based on someone's ideas. Some ideas are destructive, some are constructive. Some ideas can arrive in the form of a dream. I can say it again. Some ideas arrive in the form of a dream. So this is the game, an attempt to pay homage to Twin Peaks in the form of a solo RPG. From a mechanics point of view, the game was influenced by Paranormal Inc., and Brindlewood Bay, Dungeon World, Noir World, and the Mythic Game Master Emulator. It was also inspired by the Solo Investigator's Handbook, which we have taken a brief look at. The Solo Investigator's Handbook is a really cool guide for creating solo investigations for Call of Cthulhu. And then some other games here as well, and some Brazilian RPGs. And I don't know that much about those. Before starting here, we have all of the things that you'll need: your imagination, 6-sided dice, a standard deck of 52 cards, your investigation sheet, and a scene sheet, because like a television show, this game is divided into scenes. And here we will set up our scenario. So you can roll up the name of your town. You can roll up where your town is situated. Here are the various cases. Suddenly, the townspeople become very aggressive and violent. An important relic has disappeared. An explosion has occurred. One person has disappeared. A person in shock and injured was found wandering on the edge of town. A body was found by the riverbanks wrapped in plastic. An unknown person with amnesia and wearing strange clothes has appeared into town. Someone was kidnapped. A location was set on fire. A valuable item was stolen. The townspeople started getting sick and dying all of a sudden. So these are kind of all things that have happened in various episodes of Twin Peaks. And then here we have our investigator. So we can be a federal agent, a vigilante, a student, a doctor, or a police officer. And if you're so inclined to play the Eldritch Town supplement, we also have some other archetypes for your characters here. We have a federal agent, an astronomer, a student, a writer, an antiquarian, a librarian, and a former cultist. So as you can see, the theming is quite different, but it's super cool. I love that little supplement. And you could probably combine the two together to have a more cosmic horror version of Twin Peaks. And then here we have our secrets, and you will roll up how many secrets your character starts with, and then how many secrets will also determine their starting instability. I only had one secret, so my starting instability is 0. And then here we have the kind of secret. We can have an addiction, an identity, a betrayal, or a crime. So I, of course, rolled up betrayal here. Then you will roll up your interest in the case, and my interest was, of course, those responsible will become more powerful. And here we have a little bit about our attributes: agility, strength, mind, and presence, and our conditions. So luck is a condition that defines how lucky the investigator is at that moment. The starting value is 1d6 plus 6. Okay, so let's roll up my luck here. 1d6 plus 6. All right, 9. So often you will have to roll your luck value or lower. Luck is also a currency that you can spend to press your luck, to push your luck, to re-roll dice. And at certain times you will have to test your luck. There's also a time limit, and the time limit starts at 8. As you do better in your investigation, that time limit will go down and you will become close. You will get closer to solving that case. As things impede you, as you run into complications, that time limit will tick up. And if it ever gets to 12, then the investigation fails. So we have our simple yes or no oracle. This is a kind of a standard thing in solo RPGs. And this is all based off of your luck. You roll 2d6. You compare the results on this chart here, and you compare that to your luck, and that will give you your standard yes and, yes but, yes, no, no and no but. And then it tells you how to interpret those answers. For open-ended questions, we have two D36, D66 rolls here that will, for your actions and your theming. And so this gives you an example here that the investigator needs to know what a witness has to say. Okay, so you're interrogating a witness, and does the witness, what does the witness tell you Will this help you in your investigation? You can roll 2d66. So we have 25 and 23. So the witness says something about leave. So leaving, and 23 here, leaving duty. So you would have to kind of interpret that in this open-ended manner to figure out what that witness was telling you according to your investigation. The deck of cards, as I said in the beginning of this video, is separated into suits. So we have diamonds are single events. These are events that may or may not arouse the investigator's curiosity, leading to a parallel investigation. We have clubs are anomalies. These are events that resolve themselves instantly in a matter of seconds. Whenever an anomaly happens, mark 1 instability. We have dangers. These are bad things that can happen to the investigator during the investigation, as they may have troubled someone or not. And then we have clues, and clues are the kind of the things we are looking for the most. Clues are items, records, or traces that may lead to the investigation's conclusion. And then we get into a section about NPCs. And then here we have that modifier to, if you ever have to compare a value to an NPC's attitude, then that will modify the dice roll. So they can be hostile, and you will get a -3 all the way up through helpful, and you will get a +3 to any dice rolls associated with that NPC. And then we get into the details about all of the different moves, and the moves are also on those cards there that you can pretty easily make. And then we get into our section on playing the game. So how to set up your scene. And let's go ahead and do that now. Let's set up a scene. So I have come into town to investigate this strange pandemic. I have a secret of betrayal. I know that if I don't solve this investigation, then those responsible for the pandemic will become more powerful. But let's see what this first scene as I arrive into the town of Cypress Falls is. Now, where is that location? We can choose or roll on a location. So the rest of the book is basically random charts. You will have your charts for all of your card draws, your events, your anomalies, your dangers, and your clues. You will also have a whole bunch of random tables here for random events, your investigation progress, your locations, your various NPCs, rumors. You will have your ordinary events, a dream scene, random items, weather, personality, distance, time of day, size, adjectives, female names, male names, and family names. And then a pretty detailed example of some play. So yeah, all in all, a really cool book that does provide a lot of information. So let's see here. Let's see what time of day it is that I arrive into Cypress Falls here. Time of day. All right. So what time of the day is it? It is 4. It is in the afternoon. Okay. So time of day, afternoon. So this is my first scene. Right now, my time limit is 8 because that is the start of the game. Your time limit is at an 8. And remember, I want to tick that down. If that ever goes up to 12, then I have failed to solve the case in time. That doesn't necessarily have to trigger a game over, but it might trigger a parallel, an additional investigation that would be even more complicated because I didn't solve this investigation. Okay, let's see what the weather is as I arrive into the town of Cypress Falls. The weather is sunny. Okay, so it's a nice sunny afternoon. The exact opposite of what is happening right now up here in the Pacific Northwest. It is a very cloudy, rainy, and gloomy morning here. And we could also come up with some various sights, sounds, smells, touches, and tastes. I'm not quite sure where this location is yet. So let's see what the initial location of this scene is. That'll be a D66 roll. Actually, we just have a 1 and a 6. Okay, so the 1 is the bank. It is a hospital. So I'm okay. So that makes sense. I'm arriving at a hospital. And I am arriving at this hospital because my case is these people are dying from this strange pandemic. They are getting sick and they are dying. And so I've arrived at the hospital, maybe to take a look at the morgue there, or maybe to investigate some patients that have checked themselves in to the hospital because they are sick. And then as you create your scene, you're going to want to have a scene event by rolling 1d6 plus the time limit. Okay, so the time limit is 8. So let's see the event that happens at this scene in the hospital. All right, a 9. So we have a 9 to 12. Roll on the investigation progress table. So let's go to that table here. Roll on that. The investigation progress is a 2d6. And we rolled a 5. You notice someone talking about the case. Roll defy danger to try to eavesdrop. If you succeed, roll a rumor. Okay, so maybe we come into the hospital, we come into the hallway, we're kind of standing outside the place where, the intensive care unit where all of these people are sick, and we haven't introduced ourselves yet because we don't want to influence the situation. We don't want people to know quite yet that the FBI is getting involved. So we are just kind of standing by the desk listening to a doctor and a nurse. So let's say we have our NPCs here. We have a doctor who we are listening to and a nurse. And let's say the doctor is a woman and the nurse is a male. So let's roll up the doctor's name first. Let's see here. Doctor's names. We will have 54 here. Dr. Olivia. Okay, so Dr. Olivia. So she will be one of our main characters in this scene. And the nurse here is 26. And this is Nurse Edward. Okay, so Nurse Edward. So Edward and Olivia are talking to each other. They're discussing what is going on in this case. They are maybe talking about the pandemic. They're talking about the sickness, some of the symptoms. And so we have a defy danger. So let's look up defy danger here. Defy danger. When you try to do something that exposes you, okay, so we want to eavesdrop without them noticing us. We roll 2d6 plus the attribute of your choice. Okay, so I would definitely use presence, which makes sense. So 2d6 plus 2. All right, 9 plus 2 is 11. 10 plus. So you managed to do what you intend. Okay, so we hear them talking about some of the symptoms. We could come up with symptoms. Maybe the people who are inflicted with this disease, maybe their eyes start turning black and their fingernails start falling off or something like that. We would have to come up with something that this sickness is causing, these how the sickness is manifesting. Let's see, what else did we get because of that? If you succeed, roll up a rumor. Okay, so now we need to find our rumor chart here. And we learn an 11 here. An influential citizen, regarded by all as a respectable and good-natured person, commands a crime network. So maybe we learn about somebody in town who might have some kind of connection with this group who is responsible for that, for this pandemic, this strange sickness that is happening through the town. And we could say that we hear the name Mr. Something associated with this group. And let's see here, Mr. 1-4. We hear that Mr. Hayward. Okay, so Mr. Hayward will be another NPC. He's probably hostile. Mr. Hayward is somehow associated with what is going on, and Dr. Olivia and Nurse Edward are discussing what he is doing. Now, at this time, I could continue to dive deeper into the NPCs to see how they would react to me. I could go up and introduce myself to Dr. Olivia at this time and maybe use some of this new information. I could say to her maybe, hey, I heard that you were talking about a Mr. Hayward, and maybe he has something to do with what is going on. Does she know any more information? Maybe Nurse Edward leaves and he hears us discussing, and he might come up to me later in another scene and tell me some more information that he knows. But as you start developing your scenes, at the end of the scene, you do want to ask yourself if the scene has, so before moving on to the next scene, ask yourself the following question. Has the story progressed favorably for the investigator? If yes, reduce your time limit by 1. If no, because the scene ended in a bad way for the investigator, increase the time limit by 1. So I would say that I wouldn't want to give up the ghost quite yet. I don't want to introduce myself as an FBI agent quite yet. I want to do a little more underground, a little more undercover investigation, learn a little bit more about the different people of this town before I introduce myself. And so I'm going to kind of fade off into the distance, end this scene, and I would end it as a favorable for my investigation because I did learn a new piece of information. So I will drop that down to 7. And then I think in the next scene, I will actually tail the nurse as he possibly is going to lunch or leaving the hospital, and maybe try to talk to him a little bit. And then I could do the move where you are trailing somebody, and then I could learn some more information. And so, yeah, this is a pretty neat little game. I think it does a really good job of creating that kind of mystery and investigation that is often very difficult to do in a solo game, because a mystery usually involves the player not knowing something. But when you're playing solo, you always kind of know what's going on. But this does a good job of leading you into interesting directions and keeping the mystery interesting. And it's not so much about solving the mystery as it is discovering what the mystery is while you are playing. You will arrive at solving the mystery through the gameplay. You don't need to come up with it before you sit down to play the game. And so there are a whole bunch of different events too. Like, let's say we were drawing an event. Let's give an event example. I would take my my diamonds cards here, and we have a 4 of diamonds. Okay, so let's see what kind of event we have here. A 4. You are harassed by a person who apparently has nothing to do with the case. Okay, so this could lead to a parallel investigation because, as fans of Twin Peaks know, all of the various NPCs, they all have things that they are hiding and secrets, and we might learn new cases. We might learn about tangential cases. We also have all of these anomalies. Let's say that we had drawn a 9 of clubs. We would have you encounter a dear one. When you approach, they run away in terror at the sight of you. Shortly after, the scene repeats itself, but the person acts normally. Interesting. So somebody is afraid of you, they run away, but then they aren't afraid of you anymore. Different ways that you can find clues. You can find a tiny piece of paper with a typewritten letter. That's like what they pulled out of the fingernail in Twin Peaks from, was that Ronette Pulaski, I believe. A peculiar odor, burnt engine oil leading to the Black Lodge there. Traces, footprints, fire tracks, a key, stained clothes, residues, a regular object. So all kinds of things to boost your investigation, to make your investigation interesting, to tell interesting stories, and to come up with interesting NPCs and all of that. And then also, of course, if you wanted to add in that cosmic horror, that Cthulhu style vibe here, you could easily add in your Eldritch Town supplement to come up with other locations and Eldritch creatures and more cosmic horror inspired events and anomalies and clues. So yeah, pretty cool. This is a neat game. I like it. It's very simple. You can be up and playing it in just a matter of minutes, really. And it does work really well in creating and telling interesting stories. And that is one of the most important things about tabletop RPGs, and especially solo RPGs. Okay, now let's talk about David Lynch. This video will give me an excuse to talk about David Lynch, and I'm sure most people have probably stopped the video by now. I'm not sure what the crossover between Dungeon Dive viewers and David Lynch fans is, but it's probably not a perfect circle. But yeah, I love Twin Peaks. I love David Lynch. I have ever since. I think the first thing I saw was, I remember seeing parts of The Elephant Man when I was really young because my dad watched it. I saw parts of Eraserhead, but the first thing I probably saw was Twin Peaks, and that kind of got me into David Lynch. I have a lot of books about David Lynch, probably more books on David Lynch than any other single subject as far as nonfiction goes. This right here, this series 33 and a third is a fantastic series. It's all about music albums, and the music of David Lynch's films and his television shows is super important. It's as important as anything else that he represents. He's also a fantastic sound designer. He designs a lot of the sounds for his movies and for his TV shows. And he is also an accomplished musician who has released albums and has produced albums for people. So I love Lynch's music. I love his contributions to music. And he thinks in terms of music while he is making his films. And the soundtrack for Twin Peaks, so this series, 33 and a third, it's all about important albums. And this is all about the Twin Peaks soundtrack, which of course was directed by the late, great Angelo Badalamenti. Angelo Badalamenti's scores are fantastic, and all of the work that he did with Lynch was very, very important. And so, yeah, this is a great book all about the soundtrack for Twin Peaks, and I love it. It's super good. Here we have the Diary of Laura Palmer. So this actually isn't nonfiction. This is actually fiction. And in Twin Peaks, Laura Palmer, of course, was murdered, and her diary is a very important part of the story. And so this is a fictional recreation of Laura Palmer's diary, all about her last days. And this was actually written by Jennifer Lynch, David Lynch's daughter. And this is pretty traumatic. For those of you who watched Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me, you know what a traumatic life Laura Palmer led. And I love Fire Walk with Me. This is a book written about Fire Walk with Me. It's called Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me by Lindsay Hallam. And this is a in-depth analysis on the film Fire Walk with Me. Lynch on Lynch. This is probably the single most important book on Lynch. And this is a series of interviews in which he goes into great depth and great detail all about the making of all of his movies up through Mulholland Drive. I wish that they would release a new version, a new edition that would go through Inland Empire and Twin Peaks: The Return, because I would like to know more about those from the man himself. But this is one of the great books on cinema. You get a lot of insight into the mind of Lynch, how he works with actors, what he's thinking about when he is creating his works of art and everything. So if you are at all curious about learning more about David Lynch, this is highly, highly recommended. And then we have a series of books, of scholarly books on David Lynch. We have David Lynch Swerves: Uncertainty from Lost Highway to Inland Empire. That is by Martha P. Knockimson. And then we have The Impossible David Lynch by Todd McGowan. We have The Passion of David Lynch: Wild at Heart in Hollywood by Martha P. Knockimson. So a lot of scholarly work has been done on David Lynch. He appeals to scholars a lot, especially to film students. We have David Lynch, The Man from Another Place by Dennis Lim. I also really like this book. This is a fantastic book here. When Twin Peaks first came out, it inspired a very, very famous fanzine called Wrapped in Plastic. And I used to have a bunch of single issues, but I don't anymore. But that was a zine created by John Thorne. And this is a really cool collection of the essential Wrapped in Plastic. So this is a whole bunch of articles and synopsis, episode recaps and things from Wrapped in Plastic. And so this is the essential Wrapped in Plastic: Pathways to Twin Peaks. And this is compiled by John Thorne. For 13 years, Wrapped in Plastic magazine studied the celebrated television series Twin Peaks and its follow-up feature film Fire Walk with Me. Now, many of the important essays and interviews from those pages are collected here in the essential Wrapped in Plastic: Pathways to Twin Peaks. So this is a really nice collection, a really nice way to get a whole bunch of the articles that were in those without having to track down the independent magazines. So as fans will know, Twin Peaks was a collaborative effort between David Lynch and Mark Frost. And they each have their kind of their own interpretation of what Twin Peaks means. These two books here, The Secret History of Twin Peaks and Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier, these two books kind of represent Mark Frost's vision of Twin Peaks, what he finds important, what he wants out of it. I think Fire Walk with Me and Twin Peaks Season 3, The Return, those represent David Lynch's overall views and feelings on Twin Peaks, and they are very different. Mark Frost was more interested in the kind of conspiratorial things going on, while David Lynch was more interested in kind of the twisted, dark, and spiritual nature of what was going on. The Secret History of Twin Peaks is a really fun book to read. I didn't like all of it, but I liked a lot of it. It's a book all about the history of Twin Peaks going way back in time, and it's all told through found objects and letters and different conversations, different interviews. It's a really, really interesting read where you learn about all kinds of conspiracies. You learn about the history of the ring and the symbols and the owl cave, and you learn about the histories of the characters and their relatives and their relations and how they grew up in and around Twin Peaks. Again, this is, of course, nonfiction, as if that needed to be stated. But this is a really fun book. I had a lot of fun reading this. It does go into a lot of detail that I personally don't find all of that interesting. But just to learn about all of this stuff. And I love the way that the book was put together. It's a really pretty book. It's a nicely bound book. And it's fun to read. And this is really cool. All of the books on the Bookhouse Boys, their bookshelf here, the kind of things that they like to read: The Stand, Charlotte's Web, To Kill a Mockingbird, the official report on the President's Commission on the assassination of John F. Kennedy Jr., of course, the Warren Commission report there. I'm sure Mark Frost has read that many, many times. And then here we have the kind of the final conclusion, and this is Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier. And this is kind of what you would read after Twin Peaks: The Return. And this is written from the point of view of a character named Tamara Preston, who helps with the Blue Rose investigations. And the Blue Rose investigations are kind of like the Twin Peaks universe's X-Files. And so here we get a whole bunch of information written from the point of view of that character, Tamara Preston, all about all of the weird things that went on as she was investigating the investigation. And speaking of the Blue Rose, so the people who made Wrapped in Plastic, the magazine, when Twin Peaks: The Return, when the third season was coming out, they started a new magazine called The Blue Rose. And I have, I think, about 20 or so of the issues, maybe 14 or so. I stopped my subscription. It was getting a little expensive, but these were a lot of fun. So we have Blue Rose episode, or volume 1, talks about the secret history of Twin Peaks, the book we just took a look at. Here we have the secrets behind the secret diary of Laura Palmer, an in-depth reference guide for parts 1 through 10. So we get our an analysis of each one of the episodes, and those are really good. And that's one of the things that Wrapped in Plastic was so good about, is their episode by episode analysis and deconstruction. It just helps to put kind of the pieces of the various puzzles together. So I like a lot of these covers. This is where we live. This is actually the house of the Palmer family, which is actually a real house. What's interesting is the end of Twin Peaks: The Return, Laura Palmer and Agent Cooper, they go to this house which actually exists, and they actually interact with the owners of the actual house. The show ends up in this weird place where it's almost like it moves into the real world in a way. Very interesting. The Women of Lynch, all about the various actresses that he has worked with. An episode dedicated to Cheryl Lee. The Double Club, a family portrait. I think this was about a burlesque show, a David Lynch burlesque troupe. This is an issue on, I believe, on Mulholland Drive there. The Men of Lynch, some of his favorite actors that he works with a lot. Here we have a still from, of course, the famous episode 8 of Twin Peaks: The Return, one of the most experimental films ever made, especially for television. Twin Peaks Dune Hotel Room, the Alicia Witt interview, and the final issue that I have here. So a fun magazine to read. It was fun to subscribe. It was the first magazine I had subscribed to in a very, very long time. So it was fun to get a new magazine every couple months to read and look through. And then we have a David Lynch book that he wrote called Catching the Big Fish on Meditation, Consciousness, and Creativity. So David Lynch is a big proponent of transcendental meditation, and he's a practicer of transcendental meditation. He's really into spirituality and this idea of catching the big fish, of going for those big ideas. We have another book by Justice Neeland, and this is the contemporary film director's David Lynch. Here we have a still from either the Rabbits shorts or from Inland Empire. These characters, these rabbits, were actually played by Justin Theroux and Naomi Watts and the other actress Laura Harding from Mulholland Drive. And they played these characters called the Rabbits. And David Lynch incorporated these short films about this family of rabbits into Inland Empire. But this is another collection of scholarly essays on David Lynch's work. So I also printed out the interview between David Foster Wallace and David Lynch while he was making Lost Highway. David Foster, Lost Highway article from September 1996. And David Foster Wallace spent some time with David Lynch and interviewed him. And I thought it was a really good interview with a lot of information. And so I printed that out. And then I have this book here, Room to Dream, which is a wonderful autobiography written by David Lynch and Christine McKenna. And it kind of alternates chapters, where one chapter is by Lynch and one chapter is by McKenna. And the chapter by Lynch, they do these, they tackle kind of like the same subjects, and they look at them in different ways. It's really quite interesting what they do, because sometimes David Lynch will not remember something exactly and maybe embellish on the truth a little bit. And McKenna will come and say, well, actually, that's not really what happened. Here's what really happened. And so you get these kind of just these different points of view of the same topic. And it's really cool. A lot of really good information. But I like reading about Lynch. I like reading what he has to say about his art. And I just find him incredibly interesting. I do also have another book here, which is another study of Fire Walk with Me. Spoiler alert, Fire Walk with Me is my favorite movie. I love it so much. It's so dark and twisted and scary, and it kind of takes the idea of Twin Peaks and brings it back to its hellish roots. And so this was from a series called Midnight Movie Monographs, and this is by Mara McHugh. And so this is a single study book on Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. And then finally, I have one more collection of scholarly essays, and this is called Full of Secrets: Critical Approaches to Twin Peaks. And so these are all scholarly essays written all about Twin Peaks, analyzing the show, analyzing the movie, and just talking about what it all means. So yeah, I love Twin Peaks, and I love David Lynch. And now let's talk a little bit about movies. Let's do a movie ranking. I've been wanting to do this for some time. Okay, now let's rank the major works of David Lynch. I think this should be a lot of fun. I've been wanting to do this for some time. So coming in at number 12, I'm ranking 12 of his major works. And coming in at number 12 is the movie of his that I actually do not like at all, and I don't ever want to watch it, and that is Wild at Heart. Wild at Heart I find to be very loud, very obnoxious, and very mean-spirited. A lot of David Lynch's stuff is dark, but I rarely find it mean-spirited. Wild at Heart I do. I do not like Nicolas Cage's Elvis impersonation throughout the movie. I find it very annoying. I don't like Elvis Presley at all. He annoyed the crap out of me in that movie. I love Laura Dern. Laura Dern is one of my favorite actresses. Her performance in Inland Empire is masterful, but even she couldn't save that movie for me. So number 12 is Wild at Heart. Number 10 is his flawed, very, very flawed interpretation of Dune. And I do have one more book to show here, and that is the masterpiece in disarray, David Lynch's Dune in Oral History. This is a huge 500-page oral history on the making and the disaster that was David Lynch's interpretation of Dune. It is a very interesting failure, and I like watching it because it does have some of Lynch's weirdest ideas, but overall, I don't think the movie is very good. So that was number 11 with Dune. Coming in at number 10, I rank this definitely a lot lower than most people probably, but number 10 I would say is Blue Velvet. Blue Velvet is another one that is pretty mean-spirited and pretty dark, and it doesn't have a lot of the weirder kind of dreamlike qualities that I like in my favorite Lynch movies. However, it does have some great performances, of course, from Kyle MacLachlan and from Laura Dern. It's just not one that I return to often. It's a very, very well-made movie, and it's very dark and scary, but it's just not one that I watch a lot. So coming in, that was number 10. Number 9 is Twin Peaks, the pilot and the finale. And I'm also lumping in the 5 or so episodes of the original series that David Lynch directed. So famously, the pilot of Twin Peaks was actually kind of re-edited with an ending tacked on for a European audience, for a European market. And it was kind of made into a standalone movie. And then David Lynch directed a few episodes throughout a couple of the seasons of the original Twin Peaks, and then he returned for the final episode. And the final episode is really good. I'm not the biggest fan of Twin Peaks seasons 1 and 2. I find a lot of it meandering. A lot of it is really silly without a lot of the things that I enjoy from Lynch. But there is also a lot to enjoy in, especially in the episodes that he directed. I think season 2, once they solve the murder of Laura Palmer, it goes downhill pretty quick, but Lynch kind of pulls it back in that final episode. And the last 20 or 30 minutes of that final episode, the finale, are some of the most interesting things that ever appeared on network television. So that was number 9, Twin Peaks, the pilot and the finale. Number 8 is Lost Highway. So this is one of was this the first movie of his I saw in the theater? Or did Mulholland Drive come out first? Let's see, 1997. Yeah, so 1997. I think this was the first Lynch I saw in the theater. And I had graduated high school just a few years before this movie came out. This is a fantastic movie. It's a very 90s movie, lots of industrial music. I think Rammstein, I think Marilyn Manson makes an appearance, if I'm remembering correctly, but a very twisted movie. This movie kind of started Lynch's obsession with these split personalities where people are very different and they kind of split off into 2 different movies. He would again return to that in Inland Empire and also in Mulholland Drive. But Lost Highway is pretty cool. It's this weird kind of very dark noir movie, and there's this twist right in the middle that separates the first half and the second half, and you're kind of like, what's going on? This character was different. Now he's playing a different character. And it incorporates some like snuff films and weird things. I don't know. There's a lot of really twisted things in Lost Highway. And it also has a fantastic soundtrack with a score by Badalamenti, I believe, and also some really cool songs from like Trent Reznor and David Bowie. So Lost Highway, a very 90s movie. I think it feels the most, it's one of those movies that you watch and you're like, yeah, this is just from the 90s. After Lost Highway, coming in at number 7, this is another one that I'm waiting for the Criterion to rebuy because I have an old DVD of it. But that is David Lynch's Disney movie. That's right. David Lynch made a movie for Disney called The Straight Story, and it is his G-rated. It's a G-rated Disney movie based off of a true story of a character played by Richard Farnsworth, who rides a tractor across America to visit his brother before his brother dies. And his brother, played by the late, great Harry Dean Stanton. Just an absolutely lovely movie. So sweet. A fantastic score from Badalamenti that is more of an Americana style score with like violin and fiddle and banjo and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, Straight Story, really cool, very slow, very low key, but because it's G and because it's so normal, it's actually one of David Lynch's weirdest movies because it doesn't really feel like David Lynch on the surface. But as you're watching it, you're like, yeah, only David Lynch could have made this movie. So that was number 7, Straight Story. Number 6 is Mulholland Drive. Fantastic movie. Again, kind of a companion piece with Lost Highway and Inland Empire. It's about these two women, and these two women are playing different roles. And it's all about the machinations of Hollywood and this noir set in Hollywood, this weird kind of detective mystery set in Hollywood, where these two struggling actresses get wrapped up in these weird people who are making movies, like this cowboy and some strange guy in a wheelchair. And there's this creepy guy who lives behind a restaurant that's like Denny's. Just a very bizarre movie. So famously, this was actually started off as a pilot for a TV show. It didn't get picked up. And so David Lynch took the footage and turned it into Mulholland Drive. And I think there are points where you can tell that this was supposed to be a long running TV show, because there is a very, very quick scene where Robert Forster plays a detective. And man, I would have loved to have seen Robert Forster in a more detailed, in an expanded role in something that David Lynch was working on. But yeah, Mulholland Drive is a fantastic movie, fantastic soundtrack, really nice cinematography, and a great movie. Coming in at number 5 is kind of the original midnight movie, the movie that kicked off the whole craze of midnight movies, 1977's Eraserhead, starring the great John Nance, of course. Just what a fantastic movie. All about Lynch's fears of becoming a father. At least that's one way to interpret it. There is, of course, David Lynch and his wife have this very, very deformed baby. And yeah, this is such a great movie. There's a woman who lives behind the radiator. There's a man in the sun who is controlling the planets with these switches. It was all filmed in Philadelphia at these like factories and abandoned industrial yards. It's a very industrial movie. I think David Lynch was pretty instrumental in the kind of foundation of what we consider industrial culture, like industrial music and the way that industrial things look and feel in popular culture. But Eraserhead, very creepy, very scary, black and white, twisted, just a fantastic movie. I love this movie so much. Coming in at number 4 is his longest single movie, and that would be Inland Empire. 3.5 hours of absolute bizarreness. And this is kind of Lynch at his most Lynch. I actually saw this at the Cinerama in Seattle with Lynch Lynch was there. And I actually got to talk to him just a little bit, ask him a couple questions about the movie. And this movie stars Laura Dern, of course, and she is once again, playing an actress who is involved in this weird cursed movie. And the movie has the curse causes weird things to happen. And that's kind of the plot. David Lynch sums up the plot as a woman in trouble. That's what the movie's about. But another fantastic movie with a bizarre soundtrack, mostly written by David Lynch. He did a lot of the sound design on this movie here. And it's all about his fascination, I think, with cinema and with world cinema and different things that happen. Really interesting movie. Very bizarre, very long, kind of hard to sit through, kind of hard to get through in a single sitting. But if you can, it's greatly rewarding. It's very dark and twisted, and it kind of moves in and collapses on itself. It's hard to follow, but I don't know if you really are supposed to follow everything about it. It's more of a vibe. It's more of a feel. So after Inland Empire, number 4 comes number 3, and that is the saddest movie I've ever seen, and that is The Elephant Man, starring Anthony Hopkins and John Hurt, and of course produced by Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks, the great comedian, produced one of the saddest movies I've ever seen. If you want to cry for an hour and a half, watch The Elephant Man. Just a fantastic movie. I love this movie so much. So much heart, so much humanity, so much emotion, and such a sad topic. Merrick, John Merrick, was that his? Yeah, John Merrick, the Elephant Man. God, what a movie! I watched this just a couple years ago for the first time in a long time, and yeah, just about cried my eyes out for an hour, for an hour and a half straight. And coming in at number 2 is Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. I love this movie. I saw it in the theater, and actually that was the first one I saw in the theater. That was 92. So I had just finished watching my friend's VHS copies of Twin Peaks right before this came out. And this came out, and famously, it didn't do too well. It kind of disappointed a lot of people, but I loved it from the beginning. It's such a great movie. It takes a lot of Twin Peaks and brings it back into the hellish life of Laura Palmer and what she actually went through and what Twin Peaks is actually about her abuse at the hands of her tormentor and her eventual killer. And Fire Walk with Me is a gorgeous looking movie. Great performances. Cheryl Lee's performance as Laura Palmer is one for the ages. I love it. And fantastic soundtrack, all kinds of great music. There is original compositions by Angelo Badalamenti. And then, of course, a whole bunch of bands also did music for Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me. And of course, coming in at number 1, right off of Fire Walk with Me, it's actually a direct sequel to Fire Walk with Me, and that is Twin Peaks: The Return, Twin Peaks Season 3, which is really a 19-hour movie. David Lynch directed every single episode, and it is paced like a 19-hour movie. It's not paced like a 19-episode television show, and it is my favorite thing, period. All games, all music, all books, all TV shows, all of the things that I love, Twin Peaks: The Return is my favorite thing, period. It is so good. It's so twisted and experimental. It's funny. It's dark. It has a lot of humanity. It has everything that I look for in a David Lynch thing, all condensed down and then condensed and spread out into 19 hours. I love Twin Peaks: The Return. So, all right. Well, hey, that was a long video there, all about Little Town and Eldritch Town, and a tabletop RPG set in the town of Twin Peaks, or a Twin Peaks-like town, or with a cosmic Cthulhu horror style vibe, and some talk about David Lynch, his movies, his art, and some books that I have on David Lynch. So I hope you guys enjoyed this very long video. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.